Had a very long and vivid encounter. Watched and observed it for close to 20 minutes. This occurred while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail near Lake Tahoe, California, at an elevation just under 8,000 feet. This beast was massive. Georgia Highway 25, about 2 a.m., a family of white ones were eating a deer on the side of the road I was traveling on, with the father standing in the ditch watching over them. And he was about 10 feet tall standing in the ditch. I was literally a few feet away from them when I passed them. I saw 2 UFO over Columbia, South Carolina at 4 o'clock a.m. on Highway 77 and 26, doing zigzags and 90-degree angles at crazy speeds back in 2011. So I'm sitting here and I just heard this huge roar outside of my window. I'm in Morristown, Tennessee. I'm also in a residential neighborhood. I'm pretty sure there's Bigfoot around here, and hearing that just confirmed. It kind of sounded like a lion roar, but louder. I heard howling and growling. Yes, both. Back in the woods, at home in Ohio. I don't effing know what it was, but it wanted to eat me, and it was dark, so I thought it was the end of my life there. I heard one roar when I was 22 years old. Made an African lion sound, like a pussycat. And I lived about 30 miles out in the country here in West Virginia. There was one time I was on a 3-day solo backpacking trip and decided to get an early start and leave camp at 5 a.m. So it was still dark and I was walking past another trail that led somewhere else in the forest. I heard something say, "Hey, come here." Whatever said it was just chilling in the dark with no light source. I stopped and was going to check if someone needed help. Then they said, "Come here, come here, come here," in a really weird tone of voice. I can't explain. After that, I changed my mind and started to walk away. They screamed really loudly. I said, "Come here, effing right now." And at that point, I started rushing down the trail. Till sunrise, I kept hearing the same voice telling me to come here along the tree line. Somewhere was the only time I thought I might need to genuinely use my pistol. Yesterday, I was out riding with some friends and one of their quads shut off randomly, and I didn't think anything of it, so I was just told to continue up the trail. After going a little bit up, I noticed a deer running on the trail. Then I turn my head straight and I see a small, bald head poke around a tree, then disappear. It was about 3 feet tall and had very pale skin. I was so shaken by it, I immediately turned around and went to tell others. At first they thought I was just messing with them until one of them turned around and yelled, "Oh my God, he's not joking. I just saw it run across the trail up there." Needless to say, we got on our quads and took off out of there. The trails are all grown in, so we didn't see a face, just the top of the bald head running faster than any human could. On our way out and home, we heard whistling and yelps. None of us stopped because we were scared out of our mind at that point. It continued for about 30 minutes after we got back to the house and then stopped suddenly. My friend said when he saw it, it went into a daze where everything was kind of slow motion. So we started piecing stuff together. My friend Robert said he heard something a few months ago on his way to work, walking to his car, and it took off fast, screaming through the same woods. We think it was the same thing we saw yesterday. We also came to a conclusion that the place we ride is very bad luck for us. Every quad or dirt bike we've taken down there has broke or gotten stuck at one point. Happened near Chester, West Virginia. Had a close encounter of one running outside my tent in Evergreen, Alabama. I was recently on a trail in Tennessee, and while I was walking, I saw a dark figure peeking between the trees to my left. It was solid black and kind of human size in height, with a broad upper body. I walked back to do a double take of where I saw it, but nothing was there. I got chased out of the woods by something while on my dirt bike at 13 years old. Never saw it though. I used to live right near the rainforest in Washington State. I think the Grassman and Bigfoot are one and the same. That's my opinion though. I know they are real. My father seen one and got cast in the prints, and there was hair in the cast, and it stunk to high heaven. Me and my wife saw Bigfoot on Route 60 in Virginia at the foot of the Appalachian. Bigfoot 2011, early November, 10 p.m. Full moon light, 9 miles past Wyden, coming towards Clay. I heard vocalizations and wood knocks, SWVA, and Western North Carolina. I live in Northeast Tennessee and heard a baby crying out in our woods. I was getting my boots on to go investigate, and the last cry had a cat sound toward the end. I did not go investigate, but later saw the biggest darn black cat ever on a fallen tree. I'm thinking it was possibly a panther. I moved here in a small town in North Carolina mountains and was told by the neighbors what the tradition regarding the Sasquatch were. Simple trading of apples in a spot they made, and that's all I'm about to say about it. Cherokee little people, they're as real as you and I. My wife keeps putting apples out for them. My sister-in-law spotted one late spring where we are located in West Virginia. She's not one to mess around or easily be shaken, and she was very unnerved by the sighting. Our neighbor is a federal game warden, and he says black panthers aren't in the area, but I believe her, and she believes what she saw. My dad and grandpa grew up in Greenbrier, and they told me many stories about Black Panther encounters. People said they're not here. That's a chocolate cougar. I believe my dad and grandpa. My son even encountered one camping one time when he was younger. I live in Yancey County and remember hearing my grandparents tell stories of Black Panther in the area when they was younger. I've experienced a mountain lion, cougar, twice. Mountain lions are considered non-existent around here, but are legally protected. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? My friend and I both saw something on the side of the highway in Tennessee during a road trip. It was a titan in the snow. I'm in Ohio, and I swear I saw one a dozen years back. At night, and I was sober, I drove back roads home. In the ditch walked this biggest black cat I ever seen. Easily 3 to 4 times size of a regular cat. It took off, so I couldn't check it out. There are definitely black panthers in these mountains. My husband saw one about 2 years ago, and I know many others have seen him. We live in North Carolina mountains bordering Tennessee. We seen a skunk ape hiding from our truck in the woods when I was little and came upon a nest last year in my mom's house. Blue Ridge Parkway, Virginia. Walking on a short trail, walked through a very cold spot on a sunny day. I couldn't explain it. It was the weirdest thing. When my mom was a child in North Idaho, she and her brother were playing in the woods when it all went quiet and creepy. They sat on a rock and listened to a strange whistling sound circle them in the air a ways out, but they never saw anything. The dogs laid as flat on their bellies as they could, with their teeth as bared to their lips could wrinkle away from them. Their eyes were rolled skyward, and they were shaking uncontrollably. The kids waited until the whistling got behind them and ran for home. The dogs beat them back and refused to go out the rest of the day. Mom always wondered if it could have been a thunderbird or pterodactyl. I used to take my dogs out along the Illinois River in Peoria. We always went down the same trail. Thick forest on one side of the river. My dog was a 100-pound pit named Nico. He was 12. I was looking for rocks in the water and I could always hear my dogs walking up the trail ahead of me. And all of a sudden I got dizzy, couldn't breathe, and couldn't hear my dog. I immediately called for him and he yelled, then got more and more dizzy. He was nowhere to be seen. In a complete panic, I started screaming out for him, and there he was in front of me. I grabbed his leash and ran out of the woods. 2 weeks later, he died. I know he was older, but I don't know what happened. I would have seen him coming back up the trail or heard him. Anyways, I moved away from that area and I miss him every day. Down here in South Georgia, heard a scream in the middle of the day. Made my hair stand up, was about 20 feet up in a pine tree. The scream was about 12 o'clock, could see about 200 yards. The scream came from the other side of the creek, saw the structures. Being before the internet, I was clueless. I got down from the tree and left. That was a timber area and about 10 miles from the state line and the Chattahoochee River. 30 years later, ran into a guy from a hunting club. He said he was by himself, fixing to head home. He had a doe in the back of the truck. It was dark and packing. He said his window went dark while packing, which was about 6 feet high, a homemade trailer. Well, after investigating, I'm sure that wasn't a Sasquatch. I spent the night before on the way from AL. Anyway, they're here also, no doubt. Live in Albion, Michigan, and the College Nature Center has always been shut down because of alligator sightings in the Kalamazoo River. Imagine what they would do if they admitted there are giant hairy creatures out there in the woods. Years ago, I walked up on a big male, 20 feet from me. While I had my eyes looking down for deer sign, it screamed and growled at me for a full 10 seconds. I snapped my head up and saw it and just froze. I lost control of all bodily functions, and in the days after, lost all pigmentation of my bodily hair, from dark rich brown to snow white. There was no way how to hide how it affected me. I went from a complete, competent, confident man to one who couldn't sleep and had the shakes to this day. It not only destroyed my love of the outdoors, it ruined every aspect of my life. I trust nothing or no one and have been severely depressed. I struggle with suicidal thoughts daily. I have never been a fool and understood that mankind has been manipulated by the elitist one-worlders. But none of that seems to matter after what I saw. Have we been so bad as men that God has forsaken us? Southeast Oklahoma, 1974. 10 to 11 feet tall, 5 feet wide at the shoulders, eyes as round as pop cans, 22.5 inches long, 7 inches wide. Wow, what a pure monster. Saw one years ago going north, US 75, literally crossing the Red River. It looked like it came up out of the river and was climbing the bank on the Oklahoma side. Was going to park my 18-wheeler at the casino a few miles up the road for the night, but when I saw that big MFer, I didn't stop till Muskogee. Apparently these things are all around Texas-Oklahoma border area. Hearing that large voice was not mine saying in my head, do not run because he will chase you. The big deal was standing on the other side of the bushes and overgrown of the forest 15 feet away. I knew that the confidence was key, so I faked it and walked out the center of the road. I did not run. I never concerned myself with the voice that spoke in my head until 14 years later. I remembered seeing that 10-foot tall gorilla in northwestern Michigan back in the summer of 2000. I've seen a few experiences of the hairy man, being part Seneca and Iroquois. We have been encouraged not to speak to them. The elders will say it will make them mad, and they will see. Have 3 orb sightings near our house and 2 sets of tracks, 2 scream, howl, and yell experiences in the Ocala National Forest. I got yelled at by Juniper Spring. My brother-in-law, my son, and my nephew saw an orb near Red Lake, the same group that got yelled at and scared out while fishing on North Lake. The footprints were seen twice in that area, and once I found a super fresh track at Lake Eaton. Every location mentioned is within 3 miles of my front door. My son and I have heard wood knocks from our yard, as well as copied the knocks only to have them answered across the lake. Found Goatman tracks in Cohelee Creek, Georgia. Seen one in Belle Chasse, Louisiana, in the woods running while I was a kid, playing on the levee. I grew up in a rural desert town in Southern California back in the 90s. There was a large white dog, larger than any wolf, that visited the dairy store. My mom used to tell me a story about a bear. Its name was One Eye. The story is a long one that goes back to before I was born. Me and 5 people that was with me seen a big red teardrop shaped glowing eyes in the PP out TNT one night right in the middle of the road. We just came down, it turned around, and when we started going back the way we came, it was gone. 1986, I was traveling above St. Louis, Missouri on a 4-lane highway. It was 2 o'clock in the a.m. and hardly any traffic. We were going towards Kansas. My daughter was asleep and was fried George. I saw something ahead laying in the road. It was big and hairy and not moving. I put my brights on and stopped. I pulled up so I could look down at it, then backed up and put the truck in park. Still not moving, so I got out and looked closer. It was covered in fur the color of wild rabbits. It had a large head that looked like a German shepherd. Its ears stood up on its head. It had arms with hands with long black claws, a huge chest, slim hips, and the legs looked like werewolves in the movies. It was much longer than I am tall. I am 5'8". It had no pulse nor signs of life. Rigor mortis hadn't set in, so it wasn't dead long. It made me see such a magnificent creature laying dead. I got back in the truck and pulled up where my people could see out the window and woke them up. George was drunk and had a bad reaction. He looked out and yelled, "Oh my God, it's a effing werewolf. I've gone all my life and never seen nothing." My daughter asked, "Is that a werewolf?" No pictures because we didn't carry phones back then. Saw a shadow UFO about 20 feet long hovering over water on Naples Beach with my dad, who's a firefighter. Not sure if anyone else saw it, but we watched it cross from right to left for about 40 seconds. In Illinois' second largest city, I was walking my very friendly dogs in late afternoon. A man and woman were walking toward me on the sidewalk. My dogs went crazy, barking fearfully, getting between myself and the couple. When I looked at the couple, the man's eyes were solid black, no sclera, no white of the eyes. Seen a skunk ape hiding from our truck in the woods when I was little and came upon a nest last year at my mom's house. In 2017, I was camping near Tower, Minnesota at Pfeiffer Lake. This campground was set up so that your camping area was between Loop Road and the lake. Each campsite had a trail to the water's edge, and that trail ran along the store line, connecting the beach, fishing dock, boat landing, and each of the trails at the individual campsites. At 3:30 a.m., I awoke hearing heavy bipedal steps. Something was walking between my site and the lake, but it wasn't using the trail. In 2019, I was camping at a lake that's about 7 miles down the same road as the place I was camping in 2017. It's called Big Rice Lake. I was there for about 4 days and nights. The first couple of evenings, I could hear an owl hooting. On the last night, the owl started its regular routine of hooting when suddenly 2 very deep voices from opposite side of the camping area began to attempt to copy the owl. It was comical as they were obviously not owls and sounded more like giant barrel-chested men saying hoot hoot. In the early 80s, my grandmother told me about the wild man who would chase cars on the road going from Aurora, Minnesota to Tower, Minnesota. I always thought of some homeless guy chasing cars, but now I'm not sure that's what she meant. Back in the 70s, my brother, sister, mother, and I, being about 8 years old, were berry picking within 20 miles of this lake just outside Aurora, Minnesota. My brother tossed a small rock into the bushes, and about 5 seconds later, what appeared to be the same rock came flying back at us. We ran to our car and left. Three-toed Bigfoot of Muddy Creek. My family owned a farm in the 70s near the MA and PA border. A portion of the MA and PA Railroad and Muddy Creek were on the property. There were many sightings, and a neighbor had plaster casts made of three-toed footprints left on his property. The encounter I had in rocks was in 1998. We were camping there for a week through school. It was vocalizations that we all heard. One of our instructors was Bob Chance. He was a big figure in the area in terms of the outdoors and was around forever. He wasn't shy about talking about their existence to anyone. He talked of them as matter of fact. This even goes back to him talking about them to my mother and uncles when they were in school. What I call my first real encounter happened years later to my best friend and I. That happened in 2008 while fishing the Gunpowder River. When I was around 16, one followed us on a road as we were hiking back home. It was quick, but something never forgotten. Saw it for a second. It was late at night, but I can remember it being massive. It followed us for a half a mile or so. I can remember it keeping its distance and hearing the gravel under its feet as it walked behind us. The first time we turned around to see it, it would dart back in the woods. Then we continued, it would come back out and follow us again. When I turned around the second time, I saw how massive this creature was. It was tall, but the broadness of it is what I remembered most. It acted startled and broke through the woods. I remember hearing tree limbs break as it ran through. I used to hunt those woods a lot and eventually quit because of the feeling of always being watched. Still to this day, I get uncomfortable there. In 1984, I had my Bigfoot encounter. I was lucky my encounter was very good. I had him in mind speak with a smile. I think of them every day. I wish I could see him again. Just a tree knock in November of 2021 while hunting with a friend in Colorado. I was hit by infrasound on the Pascagoula River after mocking the forest with Bigfoot calls. Our college group rented a cabin in Salt Fork, Ohio many years ago, and we heard shrieks and knocks from the surrounding woods. We saw some strange impressions in the surrounding mud and creek beds the next morning. As a teenager, I saw one in the woods near Northport, Michigan. It was probably about 50 to 75 feet away. We were camping there, and my brother and I wanted to explore the forest across the street. It was on a large hill. We got in a good ways to the woods, and we heard the rustling, so we turned to see what caused it. Then it turned up and ran up the hill over the crest. We only saw the back of it, but clearly saw it was hairy and on 2 feet, significantly taller and wider than any person. Even though we didn't see the face, we both immediately knew without a doubt what we saw. If it were now, I would have investigated further, but we were scared and just went back to camp. We have a Bigfoot family living around us in Meigs County, Tennessee. I heard all the knocks, roar, talking, gibberish for years. Thick, muddy fingerprints all over my cattle trailer. Then a month ago, I saw a little one in a pasture that I used to hunt in. After you see one, you still have that doubt in your mind. We have a boulder thrown behind us at Torreya State Park. We heard something wading through the creek that was super massive. Sounded like it was on 2 legs. It was not a deer. 14 years ago in Port Angeles, Washington, me and my dogs, I was walking my border collies up an old logging road on Blue Mountain when I was yelled at by loud two-tone, "Hey, ya!" It stopped me and my dogs in our tracks. I never heard such a vocalization in my 60-some-odd years. I grew up in Alaska and Washington State. I've eaten berries with bears, seen and heard cougar, wolves, and coyote, even elk and moose, but nothing like that. I couldn't see what it was, but the sound of it at least 8 to 9 feet tall, maybe 20 feet from the trail, very close. The odd thing is my dogs didn't even react except to turn back to the van, which is not like them. My dogs chase everything, even a bear once. Why not this time? Their hackles didn't even go up, but their hairs on the back of my neck did, and everything in me said, leave now, so we did. I've only told a few about this recently because of the show. Now I feel more comfortable. Some of the locals and vocals that they play make me feel more comfortable. My uncle saw one in Arkansas. He was looking out over the pasture and it stood up and walked into the woods. I had my encounter on a hillside littered with trees. When you see something that big and it growls so loud you feel it, it makes you a believer. They do exist. The nurses became monsters during my tonsils and adenoid surgery. It was terrifying. They seemed to be witch, demon, vampires. As a kid, I will never forget it as long as I live. Probably about 30 feet or so uphill from me, he or she growled and I felt the vibration throughout my body. I hauled tail. I ended up rolling down the hill because I was so terrified. I wish I saw more detail. It was huge, 7 to 8 feet. I only saw it for about 20 seconds before it growled and we ran. Was no bear. I have seen a female Sasquatch feeding deer in the open sitting on a log. I was 20 feet away. I've had 2 encounters about 20 years apart. One in Canada and one in north central Pennsylvania. By the way, I'm 68 years old and only told my wife about it 6 months ago. Saw a giant snake inside a tunnel under my road growing up. Huge black snapping turtle on the same creek too. Something's in that water. I live high up on a ridge in the Smoky Mountains and have a graded paddock and leveled flat for my horse. Mostly red clay and no big rocks whatsoever. Had 32 tons sand put in and leveled. Both sides of this paddock are very steep and heavily treed. But recently, I have found big rocks in the paddock, about 18 to 24 inches long and about 5 to 8 inches thick. There's no one around, but these rocks showed up this one week. Also had 14-foot horse gate bent outwards into a V shape. Called his vet to see if my boy had ran into it or not. He checked it out, but no signs of being hurt. No swelling around his chest, no heat whatsoever on his body, no hematomas, so I am not sure what's been doing this. But bears do not throw rocks, not this big. And why would anyone want to climb up that steep ridge just to throw a few rocks at my horse? It's a very dangerous walk. Had 2 sightings. One eye shine, tree knocks during day and night, and all sorts of yells, screams, whistles, whoops, animal mimics, as well as footprints. That's why I formed the Arkansas Bigfoot Hunting Club and go out on investigations with the Arkansas Bigfoot Cartel on joint investigations. My team covers all 4 parts of Arkansas, one team in Alaska, Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and East Texas. On a film set, we heard a large tree be pushed over aggressively. The groundskeeper said something's in the woods that scares him. The history of the area has trumpet noises and concerts that were interrupted by beasts in the woods. My neighbor's young son was on my property and asked if he could do a tree knock. He'd been watching Expedition Bigfoot. Anyway, I walked to the edge of the woods with him. He knocked, and honestly, we both heard loud knocks back. Could have been something else, but this was really late in the evening, and we hadn't heard anything until he made the knocks at the base foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I saw one with my friends, and it was an encounter that scared the hell out of us. We never went back into the woods. Rocks thrown into the water, howl, strange sounds, yahoo, all in one night. Several incidences, but never saw anything. Smell, mud thrown at us, chased parallel by something on 2 feet, hit the side of a brick house so hard mom and dad heard it in the living room. I've came close to seeing them so many times. I live in McCartan, Oklahoma for 2 years and heard them on the bottom of a large rock face, almost mountain, with pine trees. When they yelled, it made my blood turn cold. I was a couple 100 feet up from them and I felt it in my chest. I know they're real. I ran into one in 1974, got within 3 feet before we saw each other. When we realized what it was, it turned and walked off into the woods, watching us over its shoulder. We did the same thing in the opposite direction. Weird knocks and rumbling at a place we call Look and Tremble on the Japola River. Don't know if it's the headless ghosts, the skunk ape creatures, or the river baby mutant. 2011, August, midday, Chapleau, Ontario, Canada. Out fishing on a small lake. We were the only boat on the lake and only people for miles. Very clear and audible wood knock. 3 people, including myself, heard it. No other sounds or anything. 2016, September, late night between 12 and 2 a.m. Petoskey, Michigan, Mitchell Road. My father was building a pole barn on his newly acquired 67 acres and had his motorhome parked towards the front, the roadside of the property. He was staying in the motorhome, and as a business owner, he was doing paperwork. Getting ready to call it a night, he was reading an email and heard the loudest scream he ever heard in his life. At first, he explained it as a woman in distress, but the volume of the scream was so loud that he had to come up with some type of animal. But he couldn't. After this happened, we determined it was approximately 100 yards at the edge of the wood line from the motorhome. No other sounds or activity since this incident. 1993, Mount Lassen, 3 a.m., almost hit him with our car. 9 or 10 feet tall, reddish brown hair. Yeah, I saw one digging in a field, walking trails alone in Central Florida. I was about 100 yards from it. First thought it was a large hog, crouched over. I moved closer and must have heard me because the Sasquatch stood straight up and locked eyes with me. And I was so startled and overcame with fear, I began wailing. It crouched down and in one step was in the tree line. To this day, I'll never forget the amber eyes, the size of golf balls. We had them in the back of my grandmother's property in Jacksonville when I was a kid. We saw them yearly. First time, I was archery hunting. 2 were following me back to the truck. Second time, I was with my husband, now ex, airboating on the river. You could say we surprised it. The encounters were from the same area, Sumter County. I've smelled it in the glades. It is bad. Thought we'd forgot to haul off a deer or hog carcass, but after it looks around the morning we found nothing. We did find tracks and impressions and saw hand and finger marks on the dust of the windows. I'm 56 now. My face-to-face when I was around 8 or 9. It was through a window of a mobile home near the Osceola National Forest. There is a certain picture of Bigfoot that gives me the willies to this day. It was looking at me as I was sleeping on the couch. I have suppressed my memory for far too long. In 1974, while hunting in the Everglades with my brother, we had a relatively close encounter with a skunk ape. The lighting was such that I could see its face. The closest thing I could compare it to is some type of primate. I've spent the remainder of my life trying to understand and study these creatures. I've had 4 encounters to this date, but I'm unable to get a clear picture of their facial features. Not face to face, but I did hear one and smell one as it circled my hunting blind while I was going after hog on the border of Brownville and Gardner, border of Hardy and DeSoto counties. It ran off when my buddy, who was in his blind about 500 yards up, started up the side-by-side and began coming my way. I could feel its footfalls as it bounded away. That's the day Bigfoot interest turned into obsession, 2016. I saw the skunk ape in Osceola, WMA, while deer hunting, 2013, at 20 yards away. I saw a serpent-like creature that might have been a mermaid on a huge rock in the middle of the Okalochnee River near the dam. It was black and slithered down like a seal. I was about 25 to 30 yards away, and it was about 11:30 at night, so I didn't see details. But yes, I saw one in southern Polk County, south of the Bradley Junction. On the last weekend of August 1972, we went to the Medicine Hat, Alberta, to visit friends. Saturday morning, we decided to go to Strathcona Park to have a picnic. At first our arrival, we started a fire to make the coals for cooking. We went down to the river and swam and played till about 1, when we decided to go back to the site. The path between the river and the site was winding and about 150 yards. Eager to get a hot dog on a stick, I ran ahead of everybody else. About 75 yards down the path, I was jogging when suddenly I smelled a strong odor. I stopped. It smelled like a freshly washed dog that had rolled around in garbage for a week. I heard a light rustle to the right, and I turned as I looked and saw a large, black, red, fur-covered back of something facing away from me to the west. I could hear the creek about 30 yards ahead, and the creature I was looking at, his butt was a couple inches off the ground. It was hunched forward at some Saskatoon bushes and had a cone-shaped head that seemed to be sitting on its shoulders. It was about 4 feet wide at the shoulders and about 5 feet high. It made no sound or movement, but when I thought to myself, what am I looking at? I was answered by a thought of, you don't see me. I'm not here. I wondered what I was looking at, and again I got the same response. As I wondered what was going on, it muttered a strange sound that has been called samurai chatter, and when I heard it, a thought of how I got here entered my mind. I immediately ran towards the campsite as I heard bush bashing where I was. When the others got back, I asked if they saw anything, and they replied no. I told them what happened, and the teasing began. Brian said I must have seen a Sasquatch, and I asked what it was. I'd never heard of them nor seen the PG film. I started dreaming about them constantly, and from that time, every time I camped in the foothills and mountains, I would have strange occurrences and encounters. To this day, I have seen about a dozen and have had 70 encounters. I forget to mention that Sasquatch was about 30 feet away with an unobstructed view. This is a rough drawing of what I saw. Off the NYS Thruway, next to the Seneca River, midday, 40 yards away, July 7th, 1975, and all the other people in the car saw it too. They exist. P.S. We tried to report it to the Bigfoot group, BFRO or whatever, and they said they don't log sightings that old. Thanks a lot. Oh, and the one we saw was about 9 feet tall, reddish brown fur, and we saw its face. It didn't give a dang about the highway it was near. Didn't seem to notice. I think it was hunting. Very strange to this day. I saw short, stocky, black beings with glowing red eyes for 2 nights in a row from 2:30 a.m. until dawn. I also saw tall black silhouette moving between the trees a couple times in the same location. A couple 100 yards or so from the short things appeared, Dan Limholm saw the tall black silhouetted beings in the same exact area and the same location I did. My father was from Louisiana, and I do recall stories of a goat-like bipedal creature. I recall a cousin of ours came screeching down the road, yelling it was near the railroad tracks, walking around, and my auntie had us all come in the house and lock the doors. I was 5 at the time, and to this day, I refuse to stay the night at anyone's house. I only do hotels. Truth or not, that has had a lasting impression upon me. I had a friend that saw a centaur in eastern Kentucky. My dad and I saw what we can almost surmise as a hellhound one day while fishing. Really short encounter, but ran right across our path, fast, agile, black as coal, no tail. Coming home from friends late night, strange feeling on the side of the road, caught a glimpse of a big hairy thing staring me down. It was firm against a tree. He was darker than the night. He knew I saw him. I saw a very tall, lean figure that moved similar to Sasquatch, but looked to be hairless. I thought I was alone, but someone who had visited the same spot at an early date witnessed several of the same. 1985, I had an encounter with a creature that looked very similar to the one in the movie Critters. I still remember it crystal clear. Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out YetiBars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti Bars!
The flesh of the unguided and non-believers fuel this void.